symptomatic thought process. Now, the people who are racist and people who want to think other people are superior, they like this concept. That's one of the reasons why they say this concept can never change. They say this is a concept to use because it keeps in power certain kinds of people and it promotes an atmosphere of fear. There's one thing I've seen in corporate life is that people operate under an atmosphere of fear. They're afraid of losing their job. You know, if they don't want to speak out and they don't want to change things because they might get fired. You have big families, you can't support your families, all these things. And there's one thing about living in the United States, you live in an atmosphere of fear. And it's hard to create change in an atmosphere of fear because you're just afraid. And not only are you afraid of losing your job, you're afraid of losing your life. And that's serious. People are afraid of losing their life, and people are afraid of losing their job. So, in America, where you have a highly technological society and culture, you also have a people who are geniuses at manipulation. So what happens is you have people manipulating these symbol systems. So you have, early on you had people being hung in America. Now they don't hang you physically, they hang you psychological. In other words, which you die. It doesn't make, if you die, you die. No matter, you know, some people prefer to be hung and some people prefer just to die peacefully. I prefer not to die at all myself. But these are the kind of dynamics that happen. So, in all graduate school and all the educational institutions, they see this as a model. You go to medical school, you go to seminary, you go to architecture school. Every discipline that you want to study follows this model right here. Now, any questions about this model that I've just described? Anybody want to talk anything about that? Okay, the alternative to this model is what we're going to talk about. What's the alternative to this model? Okay, in doing some projects with the UN, and everyone says that we can't solve problems that keep on, they're circular, a big circle. Why can't we solve the problem? So we did research on this. I did my research in Africa. And I went to Africa to study this kind of process because it all began in Africa. It all began in Africa. Didn't begin in Iraq, Sudan, in America or Asia or Latin America. This whole process began in Africa. So when we studied this process, we found that it's not healthy to call a tree a horse. Something has to change. Why did people call a tree a horse? Because they mythologized that tree. So the process is that when this entered the brain, you don't mythologize it, but you experience it what it really is. So what does that mean? When you have a cold and you have the sniffles and you blow your nose, you don't mythologize that. That is a symptom. So you live symptomatically and you begin to think symptomatically. So when you see a tree, the tree's a tree. You don't mythologize that tree. So you want to turn to. Now, one of the first people that I was extremely impressed with, and that we use as a model. And matter of fact, in a meeting I had yesterday, I was saying Africa needs to follow the Malaysian model, or one of the, we find someone who really used the symptomatic method was Mahathir Mohamad. He developed this whole thing of mindset, changing the mindset. He emphasized changing the mindset. And he had the courage to face the Western world. He accused the Western world of racism. A lot of leaders don't do that. They're afraid to do that. Because in America, it's funny because you're not supposed to talk about race at all. And you better not talk about racism per se. So, when Mahathir Mohamad called the Western world racist and a Western life more valuable than the life out of Asia and Africa, that upset everybody. Everybody got upset. And they start calling him names but Mahathir had the courage to call a tree, the sun, without saying it was something else. That is what we call thinking symptomatic. Now, there's no place in the world that's perfect. No area in the world is perfect. But by thinking symptomatically, you behave in a certain way that authenticates your existence. So being a manager is the toughest thing in the world because you're dealing with different types of people. Managers, it's extremely rough because being a manager, you have to deal with different personalities. And also initiating, changing the mindset of the people that you're working with. And that's the most difficult, I find the most difficult thing to do. One reason is the most difficult thing to do is because people do not want that to happen. They do not want mindset to change. And they do everything to prevent that. So I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm going to tell you what the real deal is. People will kill you over that. People will do everything within their power to fight against changing behavior patterns and get away with it. Because changing the mindset means you're changing your behavior. And also what happens is it initiates behavior that you can get along with other people. How you relate to other people is extremely important because this is how business is done. If you have problems connecting with people, then you're going to have problems with business. You're going to have all sorts of problems. My wife was just telling me she had breakfast in a restaurant this morning, and there were this European was sitting doing business with an Asian, and the European was talking about the Indians and Chinese hate each other, and he was causing his behavior was in a way that was superiority, in that superiority. And my wife was saying, wow, it really goes, it happens all the time, no matter where you are in the world, it happens. I see it, it happens. So it's your behavioral patterns that run the world. When you talk about technology, you talk about how do you use technology. It's not the technology itself, it's the engine that runs the technology and how it's used. So behavior patterns is extremely important. Now what I like to do is like, I have two people looking at each other and describe what's the first thing that comes to their mind about that individual. In other words, when you meet somebody and you talk to somebody, what's the first thing that comes in your mind about that person? And I look at you. What's the first thing that comes to my mind when I look at you? Or you right there. See, that those kind of dynamics decide your behavior towards that person. If you mythologize that person, you might think about anything, or you think about the myths that has been perpetuated about that person. That's the dynamics of symbolism. But when you think symptomatically, how do you respond to that person? How do you respond to that person when you think symptomatically?
More positive. Okay, for example, if we're talking about, if, for example, I see a Black African coming, right?
Right.
The mythology, the belief is that, my God, they're fierce, they're rough, you make already an image of the person. But when you talk to the person and you get to know the person, that myth disappears because the person is a person.
Very good. Very good. So what you're doing, you started out with a mythical approach, but then you change from that mythical approach to what?
To real.
What's the word?
Symptomatic.
Right. and that's extremely important. That's what happens. What you did is transcend. You went from the symbolic to the symptomatic. This procedure is so important because this is what exists for peace, to establish peace in the world and to establish good relationships with everybody. It's beautiful. This is what we do. But it's amazing when you try to go into a corporation and do that. What do you think will happen? Well, you try to go into a corporation or any line of business and do that. What do you think? What's going to happen?
Resistance.
That's when you get resistance. Some corporations don't want women to achieve or break the so-called glass ceiling. All they see is males up here. The common structure. And if a woman does succeed up there, she has to act like a man, so to speak, and then she only goes so far. It's that whole mythology around women. Like there's a whole mythology like around Africans and you were very honest with what you said, because that's a lot of them have that kind of opinion, right? But when you break that opinion, it really blows your mind when you see the energy that comes from what is real rather than the energy that's come from what is not real. And when you experience what is real, it transforms you, where you feel differently about yourself. You respect yourself. You can love other people. It's amazing what can happen during that transformation. Try that. It's unbelievable. Because that's what we do all over the world. Now, one of the top scientists in the world, a man by the name of Terence Deacon, who is a neuroanthropologist, a neuroscientist. He did his research at Harvard Medical School on brain function. He wrote me a letter and told me he didn't think black people did what I did, that I do. He had read one of my books, and he calls me up and said, "Wow, you black too? Can you do this kind of work?" He said, "You might have the missing link there." So we email each other. He's at UCLA. He went to Harvard. He was at Harvard doing brain research. Now he's at UCLA in California. But one of the things, he wrote a book called The Symbolic Species. The book is called The Symbolic Species. And I talk about it. I talk about it in my book. I have a new book out called The Golden Apple, Changing the Structure of Civilization. I talk about Deacon. And what happens is that, here's what he said. Why is peace so difficult to achieve? How about social relations? Why do we have problems in social relations? And he says contracts, treaties. See, I think I can kind of quote what he says. Okay. He's a renowned neuroscience evolutionary anthropologist. He says one of the most difficult social symbol relations to mediate is peace. This is not so much because of conceptual difficulty, but rather because of the high potential and high cost of deception. So what he's saying, and he's someone who opposes my concept. He's an expert on symbolic behavior. So what's he's saying here that peace is so difficult to mediate because of the symbolic relationships with people. Then he says, because it's high potential and high cost of deception. So the symbolic thought process is very easy to deceive. Can you see that? How easy it is to deceive people? Then he goes on to say, agreements and contracts. Agreements and contracts concerning future behaviors and obligations are intrinsically symbolic. So we all sign contracts, right? And we all have agreements. But he was saying how symbolic these contracts are. I mean, does a contract make you like somebody? I mean, are you going to do what your contract tells you to do? I mean, how many people, you sign a contract and you don't follow through, right? So he calls these contracts symbolic agreements. So if you're talking about, then he goes on to say, which is so important. He goes on to say, and he just backs me up. He just doesn't know it. He goes on to say that what is the difference? He says the reason why symbolic social relationships are so hard to produce peace. And then he goes on to say symptomatic relationships are more reliable than symbolic relationships. Why is that? There's a core difference, and I'll tell you why. A symbol can never, ever be a part of the original entity to which it points to. Now this is so important. What do I mean by that? A symbol can never be a part of that object or energy to which it points to. It's always separate. A symptom can what? A symptom is always a part of the original entity to which it represents. Okay, what does that mean? A cough is a symptom of a cold or a runny nose. Is that a part of a cold? It's a part. It's not separate from that. Or being wet is a symptom of water. A rain on the streets, you get rain a lot in Malaysia. You see rain on the streets, that's a symptom of what? The wet streets are a symptom of what? Rain. So the wet streets that has water on the wet streets are a part of the system of rain, right? So it's symptomatic. And what Deacon says is that unlike symbols, symptoms are a part of what they refer to, and this makes them reliable in ways that symbols are not. So this is why I'm saying that living your life out symbolically causes all the problems that we see in existence. But once again, the problem that Mahathir Mohamad had in the Western world was problems that anyone would have in any corporation, and the problems that you would have in how you deal with one another. One of the great things, and one of the things that he did was some years in terms of the economic crisis in the Pacific Rim, which you all know about. What he did was unbelievable. He told the World Bank and the IMF to shut it. We're not even going to deal with your programs that you want to initiate on us. I try my best to get Africa to do the same thing. The World Bank, Mahathir Mohamad talked about the speculators. He talks about the European and the Western speculators that caused what we call the downturn in the Pacific Rim. Who knows about George Soros?
Yeah.
Who heard about George Soros?
Everyone did.
I had a meeting with George Soros' staff, and one of his staff members was Chinese. And he says, we know what happened. When you have people who you deem are experts, who you think know what's happening, say something and the market goes down or whatever, who trusts a Western speculator? What I'm saying to you is that the World Bank and IMF initiated programs for Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Asia was the fastest growing economy in the world at that time. The West did not like that. So, and this is fact. This has been written about. You can look up, do your research and look it up in any paper, computer. Mahathir Mohamad told the IMF, we will do it. We will solve our own problems. We will not take your initiatives. We will do it ourselves. And that's what he did. He had the courage and confidence that we can solve our own problems. That was beautiful. So, let's see what the guy's name, Stiglitz, who Nobel Prize winning economist Stiglitz, he's at Columbia University now. He worked for the World Bank. He wrote a book about that and how Mahathir Mohamad imposed initiatives and programs on Malaysia that helped it out of the crisis. And he's to be applauded for that. Then he went on and talked about human rights, about Malaysia's human rights and the whole 9 yards. Just like the U.S. talks about the human rights violation in China. And there's no bigger violation of human rights as America. What I'm saying is that you have the power to change the world because of your behavior. You have the power. And also, what is so important, let me say this, you've got to continually study and read to empower yourself and educate yourself. You have to read in a multidisciplinary fashion. There's books that will not be recommended to you that you should be reading. That's extremely important to understand that. Banning books and banning knowledge and not telling you to read certain books is meant to keep you uninformed and ignorant about certain issues. Anybody heard of W.E. Deming? Deming? You've heard of Deming, right? Deming was a consultant in America who created a principle of 13 principles that said that certain departments within a corporation must work together with each other instead of competing with each other. We all must work together. Deming also said that all workers must be educated. I don't care what level that you're on, you must be educated. He also said that women should have the same opportunity as men in all areas of work. And he made those principles shortly before World War II. The U.S. rejected his principles. He has his PhD in physics from Yale. He was a statistician. So the U.S. rejected his principle, and he went to Japan after World War II. He built Japan after World War II. The U.S. recognized what he did and brought him back. Deming wrote a book. His latest, his most important book before he died is called Out of Crisis. You all should get that book and read it. Out of Crisis, published by MIT. Out of Crisis. Wonderful book.
Mr. Ridley, sorry to cut you in. We have prepared some refreshment outside.
Okay.
If you feel that in a break, we will take a short break.
Okay.
Have a cup of coffee, and then we will continue after.
Great,
15 minutes.
fantastic. Okay, I don't want to. Okay, we'll do that. After World War II, after his success in building Japan up, they said, we accept your 13 principles, we'll educate everybody. But what happened? The United States they're so sophisticated, they mythologized his 13 principles. So that we will educate everybody, but we'll educate everybody our way. The pedagogical influence that we'll give to the workers are mythologized. So you know what that means. And that's what happened to Deming. He lived till he was about 94. He died about 15 years ago at 94, 93 years of age. Thank you. We'll continue.
Okay.
On this MIT book by Deming,
Yeah.
what is this 13 principle? Will you be able to bring us to a brief of it?
What?
The 13
Okay, Out of
principles.
Crisis, Deming talks about how to achieve productivity and how productivity and quality are synonymous. Or I'm thinking how you can have quantity and have quality at the same time. And he talks about the cooperations between different departments. He talks about how to manage people and how you shouldn't be afraid of managing people and giving them the same kind of education that you have. Some of us are afraid. If you're a manager and someone working below you is getting a higher degree than you are, you might feel kind of afraid for your job, or that person may have the same knowledge that you have, or even gain more knowledge than you have. So you feel kind of threatened by all this. So this is one of the things, is that being healthy mentally is thinking really symptomatically, because you shouldn't fear other people. You shouldn't, because working as a team, you're not working as an individual, you're working as a team. And that builds up productivity. You can have productivity and still have quality. And that has been an issue. can we have productivity and still have quality? Yes, you can. And Deming talks about that.
Okay.
And also Deming talks about the use and the
Misuse.
and how you use your workers. He made one statement in that book that I always quote. He says America is the most underdeveloped nation in the world because of its misuse of skills, its underuse of skills, and how they treat the workers. That's unbelievable. This man is a elderly white man in America saying those kinds of things. And what happened, but listen to this, what happened, because America is so sophisticated and mythologizing, Deming was a consultant with the Defense Department, General Motors, all of the big Fortune 500 companies in America. But because of their ability to mythologize, they made his concepts impotent. This is extremely important because this is what changes the world. I'm telling you right now, this is what changes the world. And another thing, it makes you, as being a manager is a huge responsibility. It's huge. And because it's huge, you gotta study continuously. And you don't have to wait to go to school, you study on your own. You have to study on a multidisciplinary way. Because you're responsible for other people.